hello, welcome, and thank you so much for tuning in to Sarna TV. I have Phil A. Lee with us, Shrapnel Editor Extraordinaire. How are you, Phil?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I am doing well. I am doing really well because we're going to be talking about your work as well as Shrapnel. Now, we have talked before. You were actually one of the first people I interviewed when I started doing the news thing over at Sarna,
Oh yeah,
and I very much appreciate that. And now we've kind of upgraded our setup to include, a boom mic, so now we can do these things live and on camera.
yeah,
But we're that was 6 years ago. We're both older. We're both balder, and things have changed. So,
yeah.
what has been going on for the past 6 years? What has been your big
Uh,
highlights? Other than
Well, I
shrapnel,
mean,
since we'll talk about that.
um, I think my big highlights over the last couple years, I finally got my first two BattleTech novels published.
hmm
I've been, writing for BattleTech since what, 2011. But hadn't actually gotten any novels published yet, and so those finally came out, and I'm very happy with them. So
All right. Now we also asked 6 years ago the all important question of what's your favorite mech. You said Stormcrow.
yeah.
First of all, is that still your favorite mech?
Oh yeah, it's I don't think anything can ever like knock that off the spot.
Excellent. It's a really good one. And we've had the Clan Invasion Kickstarter since then. So now we have this
Yeah.
wonderful new redesigned Stormcrow. What do you think of it?
I actually really like it. I think my only lament, it's not really like a lament, it's just more like a little personal quirk, is the original Stormcrow had those teeny tiny little
Mm-hmm.
hands.
Mm-hmm.
And sure they were goofy, but I kind of liked them. But the new version looks fine without them, and I'm not necessarily lamenting the fact that they're gone. It's just that it was always like one of those weird little quirks where it's like, okay, I like that.
Yeah, it had those kind of vestigial
But the new one,
arms. Yeah.
but the new one looks professional.
Mm-hmm. It
You
also
know.
kind of looks like it's an evolution of the Nova because it has those kinds of big chunky fists, same
Yeah,
as
yeah,
the
yeah,
Nova. So it
yeah,
it, it seems to share a bit more of a common design language because the Stormcrow was always this
yeah,
one-off kind of clan mech, which
yeah.
was weird because all the other clan mechs seemed to share, like the Koshi and the Firestarter always had the same legs, and the Hellbringer and the Thor might as well have been the same from the waist down. So it was
Well,
kind
don't
of weird.
forget the Viper actually shares the Stormcrow's legs. So
Oh,
there is like a
okay.
kind of common design element. We actually had an article in Shrapnel. There's been so many issues so far that I can't think off the top of my head which issue it's in, but it was an article by Johannes, who's our tech readout developer, and he wrote about how the some like the common design frameworks of mechs. It's basically like explaining like why there's some of the like some of the early clan omnimechs like seem like they shared components, and so some people have made like some interesting mix and matches from that and to
hmm
create other new mechs,
These weird
and that sort of thing.
Frankenmechs.
So
Clan Frankenmechs.
I can't remember which. I want to say it was in like 20. It's been within like the last year. I want to say, but yeah.
Okay, then I haven't got. I'll be honest with you. I'm still on like 13 for Shrapnel. I am
Okay.
reading through them because I find it probably my favorite way of interacting with
Yeah.
BattleTech fiction right now. But I'm a little
Yeah.
bit behind the curve because you guys produce
Oh,
a
that's
lot, a
fine.
lot, and I do have them all. I'm just getting to them. I need to go
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
bathroom more often.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You can read when you're not in the
I've
bathroom.
been told that.
It's a magical little life hack.
All right, let's move on to
Uh,
the question I've been asking a lot of people is because as we're
yeah.
going through all these as the artists anyway are redesigning all these mechs, we've
Yeah.
gone through, I would say, the core ones. I mean, Clan Invasion, Mark's Kickstarter. We've even gone to
Yeah.
a bunch of the not core ones. I would say,
Yeah.
but there's still a lot of them out there. What's a mech that hasn't been redesigned that you would really look forward to seeing remade in plastic?
Actually, that's a good question because there's a lot of mechs that I really like that haven't actually been redesigned yet that I would really like to be redesigned. Let's see. And they're actually kind of sort of like faction based. Now that I think about it, let's
Mm-hmm.
see. So we're talking about like clans. I'm a fan of Clan Blood Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'd love to see like a stooping hawk in plastic.
Okay.
I'd like to see a redesigned blood kite
Yep.
because it's a pretty common blood spirit mech.
It's also
But the
just the most
way
brutal looking mech I've seen.
it's the blood kite is one of those sort of mechs where it's like you look at it and you're not really quite sure how to visually parse it.
Mm-hmm. It's
And
like Lovecraftian mech.
yeah, like I remember I hadn't actually seen the art of one for a really long time, and a friend of mine, he was offloading a bunch of mechs, and he was like, "Hey, do you want these?" And I was looking through this, and I was like, "I can't even figure out what this is." So I just took a photo of it and sent him the photo, and was like, "Hey, what mech is this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a blood kite." And I was like, "Oh." 'Cause I did not put that together in my brain. And then I was like putting it together, I was like, this still does not make any sense. Like I'm looking at the art, I'm looking at the actual mini, it's like, yeah, so that one I'd love to see get remade because I think that Anthony and his design team could really help it make a bit more sense
hmm
while still retaining the elements that make it like unique. Because like one of the common things about that mech is where is the cockpit?
I think it's in the middle. I couldn't tell you. I thought it was one
Yeah,
of those mechs. There's those rare mechs because I think like the Hunchback is one of them. Although it's still pretty obvious where the Hunchback cockpit is, where it doesn't
yeah.
like the pilot is behind a plastic or like a full sheet metal, and
Yeah,
it just the pilot
but it's
sees
like
through cameras.
is the giant weapon like above the cockpit? I think it's a was it a laser?
Yeah, I think
Something that's
it's
like
a
above the
large laser.
cockpit, or is it like this little bump atop on top of that? It's kind of hard to say.
It's
I've
yeah.
I've seen multiple just like was it like Assassins? I've seen multiple different iterations of that. So
Yeah, Assassin's another one with the cockpit. I mean, it's been standardized now because they've redesigned it, but it was one
yeah,
where the
yeah,
cockpit could have been anywhere along the front torso.
yeah.
All right.
But for like let's see other factions. It's no surprise I'm like a huge Free Worlds League fan,
Mm-hmm.
so uh, I'd love to see. I was actually kind of surprised. I came across this in a Shrapnel story and was like, "Oh yeah, I really like how this is like one of these mechs where it's like I really like the look and feel of it. I haven't really played it much on the tabletop, but I just love like the aesthetic of it. And I was like, oh, we don't actually have one of these redesigned yet. It was the Apollo.
Oh yeah.
I was
Okay.
like, that seems like it's kind of like a gimme, and it'd be pretty easy to do. And I immediately went out and bought an Ironwind Metals miniature of it. And was surprised that it's like a single piece because
Huh.
there's not very many of those anymore. That's a single piece, and I was like, okay. So I like glued it onto a hex base and sent a photo of it to Dakar Layout guys, and I was like, well, I guess I'm done.
They have a few. I actually appreciate the ones from Iron Wind that are just a single piece,
Yeah,
because like
you know, like
I had the
let's say,
oh, so go ahead.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I had the Tiburon, and if anybody's
Yeah.
had the Tiburon, it comes to you in
Oh,
like two dozen pieces. You have to put together each and every individual fingernail.
that,
It's terrible.
that was my that was my Achilles heel. That one
uh-huh.
almost broke me.
Mm-hmm. I got there, but it took a while.
Um, yeah, but yeah, the Apollo Mini I liked because it's like even for one that's like it's an older sculpt, it still looks good. So yeah, so I'd love to see a redesigned Apollo. I always liked the Perseus,
hmm
which I believe was introduced back in let's see, what was it? Field Manual Free Worlds League.
hmm
And that's just one of those mechs that's like you like it because it's goofy, not necessarily because it's effective. Um,
Well, it was like that was
so
the. It's kind of like this redesigned Orion. So it was
yeah,
still like, I mean, you could do Orion things with, well, except for tank particularly well because it's got an XL engine, but
right.
it's still just throw a lot of guns on something, see how it does.
Yeah.
All right, let's move
Um,
on. Because I wanted
yeah.
to ask you about certain things about your works for writing. First of all, before we dive into the shrapnel questions, as much as you're editing Shrapnel, you are also still writing, as you mentioned. Your most recent published works sort of deal with the Free Worlds League and the Clan Protectorate and how they're trying to get along. It's this very interesting story of integration between Inner Sphere society and this very displaced clan society. Is there
Yeah.
any chance we'll be seeing more of Spirit Cats, perhaps more Spirit Cat characters aside from Star Colonel Ricard?
I'm honestly not sure yet. I've got a couple of irons in the fire, some ideas that I'm working on. I'm not sure how much the protector is going to factor into that. But it's always percolating. I make no secret of being a huge fan of the clans, a huge fan of the Free Worlds League,
Mm-hmm.
and the Clan Protector. It's like the perfect genesis of those two worlds. Um, so yeah, I'd love to do more with them. I'm just not sure what the roadmap is for that yet.
Fair.
So
Uh,
yeah,
and also, I know that you're going to be writing one of the books for the Wars of Reaving trilogy
yeah.
is set to come out next year. Last I heard about those. Is there anything you can tell us about the book you'll be writing for that trilogy?
Well, the book. So the three books in this trilogy. They are sort of chronological, and they're being written by different authors, and we all sort of have our own different styles. And so what we did was we sort of broke up the whole time period into like certain like uh, tent poles, I guess. And we each sort of like took a specific section of that. And they sort of deal with things in a different way. So like Craig's novel uh, has like a certain way of looking at it and gets to a very specific, noteworthy point in the story. And then Jason has like it comes at it from a slightly different angle, sort of tells like the middle point of the story. And then mine is basically like the tail end and like the wrap up of that. So,
Okay.
so I was sort of so we have like shared characters throughout the entire series. But like Craig's story, for example, I think concentrates a lot on like the Clan Wolf stuff, and then Jason's concentrates a lot on like all of the excuse me, like the Clan Burrock and Dark Caste Society stuff. And mine's more about like the big inter-clan fights that's going on. So mine, for example, is largely focused on some of the interactions between Clan Blood Spirit, Steel Viper, and the Star Adders. And I mean, all the other clans are represented, of course, but those are like the three main ones that I'm focusing on in my book.
Right. And there's going to be a nice happy ending, I hear.
For some people,
Okay.
maybe not for everybody, but for some people.
All right. Well, let's move on to the shrapnel questions because
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you a lot about shrapnel. Shrapnel is a big part of the BattleTech lore, and it's easily the most words. I think probably the most words BattleTech produces. Is that accurate to say? I'm not sure. Because
I'd say people say it's the most dependable uh, fiction product, I guess. Not to cast any aspersions on John's work, but it's like we always like Shrapnel comes out like every 3 months, like on in clockwork.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's why people mean by like most dependable, because sometimes novel releases can get pushed for reasons that are kind of out of our control sometimes, and stuff happens. We've had like one of the early mishaps, I guess, in Shrapnel was when, for example, Mike Stackpole's mother passed away, and so we end up having to like push the final part uh, of his 4-part serial novel to the fifth issue, just because we wanted to make sure to give him time you know, to uh, to process that and Because I mean, we're human beings, so we're going to be like, give us manuscript now,
Yeah.
But yeah, so Shrapnel's is dependable in that vein, is that we're always coming out like every 3 months, middle of the month, same 4 months every year. Uh, so
Right.
yeah. But I think in terms of like actual novels, the novel word count I think is a little higher than Shrapnel. So
Okay. But still, there's a lot of words coming out of Shrapnel.
oh yeah, yeah,
And I remember last we spoke of this, it was actually just an idea that you were
yeah,
championing to
yeah,
the higher ups. And since then, it seems to have become quite the success. So tell us
yeah.
the story of Shrapnel. How did it go from this
Okay.
idea into the
So,
6 year long publication so far?
okay, so Shrapnel happened because the Battlecore website died. Uh,
Okay.
I won't really bore you with the details. I'm not going to name names or lay blame or anything, but basically the site just broke. And uh, I sort of scrambled because I literally had like a couple more stories in the pipeline that I was ready to publish. They were already copy edited. I was about ready to send them out, and then the site just broke, and it was broken in such a way that it was kind of like irretrievable. Now we had backups of like all the stories, like none of the content was lost, but like the actual site was just gone. um and so at that point I was like, well, crap, I've got these stories that I want to publish. um I had a couple more submissions I hadn't even gotten to yet, uh, like a handful or two of them. And I also had a lot of stories that I wanted to write and publish as well. Um, and so I was sort of kind of scrambling for like an idea of what to do with that. Um, and it took a while. And I went through a couple different iterations or whatever. And I was like, oh, what I wanted to do was try to change the format in a way that sort of like appealed more to like modern readers. Whereas back when Battlecore first came out, like having like ebook stories on like PDFs, like that was pretty groundbreaking at the time. We got a whole bunch of subscribers from that, like just reading on your phone or on your computer, PDF reader, what have you. But things have changed a lot since then, to where there's basically everyone, most people have like a Kindle or an ebook reader, or they have like the Kindle app on their phone, or they get uh, um, like books through Apple or whatever,
Hmm.
that sort of thing. And so we had all these stories that were in PDF form that were not as easily accessible to most people through those devices. Now, obviously, you can toss a PDF onto a Kindle or an iPad or whatever, but it's not necessarily an easy process, and sometimes it's a little more frustrating.
Hmm.
And plus, we had some PDFs that were being printed in like a two-column format, so it's kind of almost like you had to like zoom in and then like scroll to the bottom. Okay, I'm done reading that, and then
Yeah.
kind of and yeah, and just for reading fiction was not very conducive. So I was like, okay, what if we uh, take the idea of Battlecore as being like a place for publishing short stories and turn it into a digital form uh, literary magazine. Like something along the lines of, Asimov's or Analog or fantasy and science fiction, like one of those sorts of publications. And it would be largely focused on the fiction, and might have like a letter from the editor or something, that sort of thing. But it would be an actual magazine that would take user submissions, or reader submissions, that sort of thing, just like we did with Battlecore, but it would be an actual magazine that people could buy and download onto their, e-reader or whatnot.
Hmm.
Um, and I put some mock-ups together and showed it to John, and John thought it was a great idea. And then I took it to uh, um, Randall and Lauren at Origins one year. I think it was that 2016, 2015. I think it was a while back. And they thought it was a great idea. And but the one suggestion Lauren had, which I kind of initially pushed back on at first, was he's like, okay, this is a great idea, but how about we put some game content in it? And at first I was kind of sort of like leery about that because um, there's like we tried experimenting with that in Battlecore a bit, especially like in some of the latter days, and it seemed like it was kind of sort of mixed results. So I was kind of lukewarm in the idea of putting game content in there. Um, but I was like, well, I mean, I can try it. Put some, I don't know, unit digest or something like something fun, like one-off, small nuggets that people could do stuff with. And so basically, just kind of like grew from there. I got a soft green light at that point, and I did some work on it when I could, going through some of the old Battlecore slush, the slush pile of
Hmm.
submissions, and but it really wasn't until the Clan Invasion Kickstarter uh, came up that we're like, hey, let's make this a stretch goal. It's like we hit this particular stretch goal. We'll fund the BattleTech magazine for at least 4 issues, and we'll send everyone copies of it. And so that's kind of basically where it started from. We had like a brainstorming session at one of our little writer summits. I think that was back in 2019. I think it was.
Hmm.
We settled on a title, which was like I think it was like one of my 5 or 6 original ideas was shrapnel, and so we all kind of agreed on that, and that's basically where it came from.
All right. Now, Shrapnel, the return of Shrapnel also meant the return of many things. One of them is the return of those like old school ink drawings,
Hmm.
like what you see in some of the really old like first publication novels.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
now, I'm not asperging any of the new art, any of the new 3D art. It's all great, but
yeah.
there is a certain magic to those kind of old school ink drawings. Um,
Hmm.
how do you decide which stories get those ink drawings? Is it luck of the draw,
Well,
or is it do the artists get
so
to like bid on it?
okay, so first caveat is I had kind of wanted to do original art and shrapnel from the beginning.
Hmm.
And first off, we didn't really have like the artists in our stable that could really pull off those kinds of pieces at the time because we were largely dealing with, unless we're talking about like tech readout art, which is very specific.
Hmm.
We were basically just doing all color source books at the time, and so we didn't really have like a lot of like black and white artists that we could draw from in our pool at that moment. And so we ended up using like found art from other sources, and just publishing that in black and white, which is fine. It worked. But then I came across an artist. Um, actually, some I found him on one of the BattleTech groups on social media, and I saw his art and was like, "Wow, this is like fantastic!" And it reminded me very specifically of um, oh, what's his name? Ed. Uh, Geyer. Is it Ed Geyer? I feel like I get his first name wrong. Um, you can fix that in post.
Well, I don't know if we can fix pronunciation in post if it doesn't already exist. I don't have quite those kinds of audio tools available. But I mean,
No, I meant the his first name.
okay.
Um, but yeah, so I saw it. I was like, his work reminds me of Geyer's work from the source books in like the late '80s, early '90s. And so I showed those art pieces I think I showed them to Ray Aracia, the line developer, and he was like, "Oh, this guy is great. You need to like have him try doing a couple pieces." And so for I think it was issue 6, I went through all the stories. This is to actually going back to answer your question of like which stories get art. Um, the roundabout way of getting there.
Right.
I went through the stories for that issue and went, okay, what of these stories can I pull a really good visual image from that I can write art notes for and give that to this artist and see if see how he deal with it. And so I picked a couple pieces I thought had some really good action scenes, hand them off to the artist, and he turned out some fantastic pieces. So so I talked to John. I was like, "Hey, what kind of an art budget can I get for future issues?" And so we eventually just ended up like ramping up the art budget. Uh, Found another couple artists to work with, and it's gotten to the point where I try to, if possible, put a piece of art for every story. There's like a couple exceptions. Like lately, I've been doing having covers made based on certain stories that are actually in the issue.
Hmm.
And when that's the case, I usually don't have a separate piece of art commissioned for that particular story, just because, I usually pick like what would be the best action moment for that story, and then work that in. So it kind of doesn't really make sense to have that done twice, essentially.
Yeah.
And I usually don't do art for the serial novel pieces, um, just because it's just a matter of, you know, time and economy and that sort of thing. It's usually because once we finally get around to part four of that particular serial, I give them the cover
Right.
as like yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So, but every once in a great while, just because of either time crunch or just artist availability, that sort of thing, we can't always do a piece of art for every single story. And that in that case, it's just a matter of just triaging, where it's like, I try to focus on pieces that will make like really striking images, or be like a really good piece of storytelling, where you can kind of look at the image and it's for that story, and you can see what the moment is from that story, like as you're reading it. Like those are the kind of pieces that I tend to that I try to focus on.
Fair enough. Okay. So let's go back to the beginnings of Shrapnel. Now, I remember Shrapnel 1 was mostly stories from BattleTech veterans.
Mhm.
But since then, we've seen a lot of new names come into the Shrapnel fold. How many new authors would you say become repeat submitters? I know of a few of them off the top of my head. And will we
Yeah.
soon get a lengthy novel from one of these new authors?
I'd say that once an author has gotten to like maybe three stories, I'd consider them to be a repeat submitter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean by published stories, because I've had some people that have sent in submissions, a couple different submissions before I actually buy one of their stories and publish it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I've had a number of repeat submitters over the years. Some of those have actually already graduated on to writing longer form pieces. The one that immediately jumps out of my head is James Bixby, for example, where his very first piece of fiction, I believe, was in Shrapnel 6. And he's been regularly submitting stories ever since, to the point where he's the current running um, serial novel in Shrapnel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, See, I've got a couple other folks. Let's see. Giles Gamage, for example, his first story uh, was in Shrapnel number 4, and he's sent me many submissions over the years, to the point where I consider him one of my dependable regulars. Uh, um, let's see, I'm trying to think of some other ones. But yeah, we've had numerous folks that like one of the goals that John and I've always sort of had with Shrapnel as like a venue is the idea of having people send us short story submissions, and we're like, oh hey, this story is like really really good. Like might encourage them to send us another submission if they haven't already, because sometimes it's as soon as I buy a story, I'll
Hmm.
get another one from them like within the next month or something. Um, and but the idea is to sort of like find some of these new voices, and like nurture their talent and their craft to where they're comfortable writing longer form pieces. So they might write like a novella, or maybe move on down the road to like a serial novel, like a short novel, or like a full length novel, you know, down the road. Oh, another great example of that is Tom Levine, for
Hmm.
example. He started out, sent me a short story. I published a couple of his short stories, and then eventually he worked up to one of the serial novels. And his let's see, we published a novella from him also. Was it Emerald Sword? I think it was called. And then his novel Blood Will Rise was published earlier this year.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So you can kind of just see that like progression path with them and like another number of other authors. So.
All right,
Oh.
cool. Um, have you considered so Shrapnel? As far as I'm aware, doesn't actually advertise too much. I haven't seen an advertisement for Shrapnel. Sarna is available, by the way. Um, do you feel Shrapnel has enough authors, or could you always use more? And would you consider advertising Shrapnel as a venue of getting more authors to submit?
You mean like outside of the BattleTech
Yeah,
ecosphere?
outside of the BattleTech ecosphere.
I mean, we haven't yet. Um, apart from, I mean, we have like social media posts on, Facebook and so
Hmm.
on and so forth, or whatever, that are like, "Hey, are you interested in writing a story for BattleTech? Submit to Shrapnel." Like we have posts like that every once in a while, just to remind people that we are actively taking submissions. Um, but I mean, honestly, we get enough submissions that I don't think we necessarily need to like cast out to like a wider net. Largely because advertising to like a wider audience would probably greatly increase the amount of um, not good submissions, I guess is the most polite way of saying it.
Okay.
Like for example, I've heard horror stories about other magazines that they've gotten so many weird submissions. They've gotten like AI, generative AI written stories. We haven't gotten any of those that uh, to my knowledge. They'll get stories that are just completely inappropriate for their venue. They'll get just people that uh, will submit a story without even reading the submission guidelines, basically. Like, I don't really get a lot of that. It kind of makes my job a little easier because when I open a submission, I know that it's going to be from someone who knows BattleTech, is probably a passionate fan also. And so that kind of helps keep the quality of submissions actually like relatively high, to the point where a lot of the stories that I end up rejecting are from people that aren't necessarily bad writers, but I can tell that they're like at an early point in their journey of discovering the craft of writing, where it's like they might have a good story idea and like the execution might not quite be there, or they might have really good writing chops, but like they're kind of might have some issues with like just nailing the BattleTech aesthetic, or just certain storytelling elements just don't really work, that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, so kind of keeping it within like the BattleTech advertising, general advertising ecosystem has kind of worked pretty well for us so far, I think. So yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Now, I asked this of John Helfers when I interviewed him, but I wanted to ask you
Mhm.
especially because you, as you said, sometimes deal with
I am,
authors at the beginning of their writing journey.
yeah.
Do you ever struggle with maintaining the tone of authors who submit with their works to Shrapnel while you're editing them?
Um, every once in a, I mean, honestly, not really. Because again, as I mentioned, most people who submit to Shrapnel are BattleTech fans. They've read all the novels. They've read most of the short stories. Like they know what's up. They know essentially what BattleTech feels like. Every once in a while, I'll get a submission from someone that I can tell was like they might be a professional writer and published other stuff in other venues or whatever, but they don't really like know BattleTech well enough to get the aesthetic. And so sometimes those authors like the story might be great and it's got some of like the BattleTech hallmarks, but I know they can sort of push it a little more, make it more BattleTech. And um so there've been a number of times where I've like shepherded people with that. And but by and large, like I don't really get a ton of submissions from people where it's like they're writing about like the grim dark future of war, like that sort of thing, um, or like writing material that's like wildly inappropriate. I don't really see that a lot. Um, but yeah, I mean, I've gotten some stories where it's just like that they wrote it as a BattleTech story, but it had like some weird sci-fi elements that do not fit BattleTech at all. Not necessarily that they're like of the forbidden technologies, um, but like it just doesn't work as a BattleTech story. Um, and I haven't really like every once in a while I'll get a story where I'm just like, dude, that's gross. Now, and granted, I mean, we write war stories, and there's so there's like a certain level of violence and stuff that happens. Though I personally prefer to kind of keep it as realistic but sanitized as possible, so as to not like you get your point across, um, you know, but try not to harp on it too much because some people can be sensitive about that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Um,
I can
in
be
fact,
sensitive
especially
about that sort of thing.
like a lot of times, actually, a lot of times when I write stuff or when I work on stuff, I think about when I go to conventions and there's like precocious like 8 and 10-year-old kids who are like, "Hey, what's new BattleTech?" And like the parents are like, "He's read them all," and I'm stopped thinking it's like, "Oh, even read that one novel from the '80s with the weird problematic stuff in it." Yeah, I sort of kind of like take that approach when it comes to like the level of violence and stuff in stories, and I try not to like police that too much with authors. My regular folks generally know where the tone level is. Newer folks, might need a little bit of prodding, but by and large, I don't really deal with people trying to go too far out of the box of what I and also what John deem appropriate for BattleTech fiction.
Fair enough. But speaking of sort of the grim dark universe, we recently had the Gothic Shrapnel release, which was a
Yeah,
surprise. I was
yeah.
not expecting that.
I was not expecting it either.
Okay, well then, how did that come to be? Did you just get all these authors coming at you, being like, "Hey, this sounds really fun. Let's write about this crazy alternate
Okay,
reality."
so I'm trying to remember what the timeline was. I knew about BattleTech Gothic back in, oh goodness, it's been, I want to say like I can't remember, was it 2021 or whatever, back when we first were talking about making Gothic a product,
Mhm.
where they're like, hey, the 40th anniversary is coming up. What do we want to do that's special? And doing like that's where the whole BattleTech Continuum idea came from, was that whole line of thought. And Gothic was honestly one of the first ones that we talked about. So I knew it was a thing back then. And and then Shrapnel got moving and whatnot. And then I think it was back at Adepticon earlier this year. I was talking to Lauren Coleman, like me and John or whatnot, and I think and actually I think we were having like dinner with like Mike Stackpole, Brian Young, a lot of our other prolific authors. Um, some of the like Ray was there, line developer, and uh, I believe it was Lauren who said, "Hey, so why don't we do an all Gothic issue of Shrapnel?" And I was like, I mean, we could do that, yeah. Probably have to get moving on it now because I try to I have things planned out like as far in advance as I feasibly can. And but I think when we left Adepticon, we sort of kind of I think we settled on the idea of, well, I know Mike Stackpole wants to write like some stories, like maybe take like some classic scenes from the Warrior trilogy and rewrite them with like a gothic focus, or whatever. And we were maybe talking about how like we might put those as like a one-off story in just a regular Shrapnel issue as opposed to having a full all gothic issue of Shrapnel. And so I was kind of like, I mean, that could work. But then I stopped and thought about it for a second, was like, well, I know the concept of BattleTech Gothic is not for everyone. Like there's some people who are like, oh, that's like really cool. Like I love these new mechs. Like this world, it's kind of like a breath of fresh air with from mainline BattleTech. It's like, just a fun little sandbox to play in or whatever. Um, and then there's some people who are just like, it's not really my thing. And then there's some people who just absolutely hate it
Hmm.
for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm not like you'd have no reason to interact if you don't like it. Just you don't have to
Yeah.
interact with it. It's just there.
Um, and and so I was thinking, I was like, okay, well, if I actually start putting Shrapnel, or if I start putting BattleTech Gothic stories in Shrapnel, first off, some people who don't really aren't really aware of Gothic are kind of gonna be like, what is this? This doesn't make any sense. And then the people who like really hate the idea of BattleTech Gothic are just gonna be all like, well, that's a waste of time. I'm not gonna read this story, like move on to the next, or it's like, oh, am I gonna if they're gonna keep doing this, I'm gonna cancel my subscription, or
Hmm.
whatnot. And I kind of wanted to not have that happen. So after more conversations with Lauren's like, okay, all Gothic issue of Shrapnel, go. And so I went and I reached out to some of my more prolific authors. In fact, most of the authors in that particular issue are either I got some of the veterans in there like Mike Stackpole and Brian Young have been writing stories and novels for us for quite some time now. But a lot of the folks in there are also shrapnel veterans by this point, who are dependable enough to that I, when I approached them for say, hey, do you have any interest in writing a short story for this shrapnel Gothic issue? They immediately jumped at the chance. They sent me like some pitches for stories that they wanted to write, and then I went through. And John and I chatted about the stories, and we chose the ones we're like, okay, write these stories for us. And so they wrote the stories, and then they sent them in, and I put them all together, and that's how the all Gothic issue happened.
All right. Will we see other BattleTech Continuum products also get the same sort of like unique shrapnel treatment?
I'm hoping so. Um, um, and now the fact that we've seen like how well the Gothic issue came together. I know it's possible. Like I feel like the Gothic issue is kind of like a proof of concept too.
Mm-hmm.
We're just sort of just seeing how well this could be put together. And I know there's some people Sure, they might like, poo-poo on Gothic or whatever, but they're like, oh, hey, the rockets and ray guns setting or whatever we end up calling it. Hey, that could be cool. You're gonna do a special issue for that. And I was like, at this point, I can't promise anything, but I would like to do a special issue for each of the major themes that come out through Continuum. Whether that actually happens, remains to be seen, but odds are we'll try to make it happen.
All right. And it's just a reminder. I think we have anime and rockets and ray guns, the two that
Yeah.
I'm aware of.
I think I'm not sure how many more we have in the pipeline, but those are like I ideally the next couple, I think.
All right. Uh,
Yeah.
so the rules for submitting to Shrapnel are, of course, written in Shrapnel, and we've already
Mhm.
talked about a little bit about the tone of BattleTech as something that most Shrapnel authors would need, and indeed most have because they're BattleTech fans and they've read a lot of BattleTech. But there are some unwritten rules of Shrapnel. For example, I was speaking with John Helfers, and he said that any Clan Wolverine story just goes straight in the bin. That's it. It's just not even looked
Um,
at.
well, actually, I'd sort of countermand that in saying that it's got to be the right Clan Wolverine story. Because I've had people pitch me stories about like, oh hey, here's a story about Clan Wolverine and its secret ties to the Word of Blake and Comstar, and I'm like, no, no, no. Or what's the stories that are set after the Wolverine annihilation are kind of um, sort of off limits too. Um, like kind of for similar reasons because people are going to try to do things with them that we don't narratively want to do. There have been very few stories, fortunately, that I've rejected solely because they would canonize something that neither I nor John nor Ray nor Rand or Lauren like because I know their preferences for things too
Mhm.
that none of them would want to canonize because it usually is the case it would paint us all into a corner that none of us want to be in. um and sometimes, I mean, sometimes that's pretty obvious. For example, like, Wolverine stuff, like
Mhm.
uh there's stuff like that that we don't necessarily want to go into or don't feel like we need to go into, simply because like there's for example, there's some story submissions that I've gotten that basically like confirm rumors of like mysterious things from BattleTech's past, and we're not really about that.
Right.
It's like we we would like for some things to remain mysterious, and so canonizing what the actual answer to that mystery is like not really in our best interest. Let's see, for example, there's uh, like sometimes we'll get a story that will actually step on the toes of um, uh, projects that are already in progress. Like for example, we're working on our Wars of Reading trilogy, and I think I got one submission that um, that would have ran like smack dab right into that,
Hmm.
and kind of would have actually wrecked something that all three of us are sort of working on. And so I was just like, I'm sorry, this story is fine, it's serviceable, but it contradicts with things that are already in progress, and I can't take it because of that. And it's like those sorts of rejections are the ones that like really kind of,
Mhm.
wound my soul, especially if I can tell the author uh has got really good writing chops. Um so yeah, so those rejection letters I always write personally. And uh um I always encourage them to write another story. Um, so yeah.
All right. Well, just to
Um,
be clear, are there any other topics that people should probably avoid if they wanted to get published?
hmm. let's see. Well, things that are on like the bleeding edge of the timeline, I would recommend people avoid those if they can, because a lot of times we'll have, um, I've seen people wanting to write like late 3152 or 3153, like in years we haven't even touched on yet
Hmm.
in the narrative. Um, and I recommend people not do that simply because again, it will almost certainly conflict um, with in progress products. I mean, yeah, those are really like the big ones. Is like trying to trying to solve mysteries, especially ones that have been around for a number of years. Like yeah, and bleeding edge stuff and going into territory that has never been touched on with good reason. And again, sometimes that's just a matter of, you know, write it and find out.
Fair enough.
Which is why, like every once in a while, I'll get an email from someone. It might be like one of my regulars, or it might be from someone like maybe I talked to at a convention. Some of those will get like verbal pitches for stories, and I'll kind of give them like a litmus test of like, I probably wouldn't write that because of X, Y, Z, that sort of thing. Or I might give them like suggestions on how to tweak it to make it work, that sort of thing. But yeah, by and large, that's kind of the general, you know, probably not a good idea sort of answers.
All right. Now, as mentioned, everything published in Shrapnel is part of the BattleTech canon.
Mhm.
So maybe assume this, but everything goes through fact check before it gets published as part
Yeah,
of Shrapnel, right? Okay,
that is
good.
correct. Yes.
Has there ever been an issue where it became a challenge to get everything through fact check because of a deadline? And I'm specifically looking at issue 15 and that double sized issue.
Um, not that I can really think of. I mean, our fact check team is really good at what they do. Um, our the lead for the fact check team, Eric Saltzman, he's a walking encyclopedia
Hmm.
of BattleTech minutia. Um, and he does a really good job of wrangling the team. He's a really great fact checker himself. Like anytime I need any fact check question answered, I go to him. I can ask him, and I'll probably get a definitive answer with citations.
Ooh.
Usually by the end of the day or the next day or something, depending on what he might have going on. But our fact check team is they're very thorough. Like we have certain people that are like really good at certain things. Like there's a couple people are like tech readout whisperers.
Hmm.
Like they can look at an entry and basically like spot that, oh, this armor calculation is wrong, for example, or the order of the weapons and equipment in this needs to be fixed, because it's in the wrong order. Like just even stuff that you know inconsequential, um, is stuff that they know what needs to be done to fix it.
Hmm.
Um, sometimes sometimes I have to give them a slightly shorter deadline than I need to, but usually the deadlines that they work from anywhere are long enough that they can get through and review stuff that they need to. But yeah, by and large, not really much of a problem with getting stuff through the team. And one of the things I love about our fact check team, as a shout out to them, is that you think most fact check teams are like, okay, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, fix it, this is wrong, fix it. They'll point out if something is wrong, but then they'll also do their best um, to provide a suggestion on how to rectify it. And this is actually like really helpful with things that aren't necessarily like black and white sort of type thing. Like for example, like we might have a story where it's set on a planet, and for whatever reason that planet doesn't work. Like maybe it was involved in a different like it was not on the right side of the border at the time or whatever. They'll usually like, for example, provide a planet that actually works, that fits the timeline, that might have the specific terrain and stuff that like a battle might need, that sort of thing. And they'll come up with suggestions like that, or they'll be like, "Hey, this works, but maybe the date can change, and like this would be a good date range, and like change to like one of these years, that sort of thing." And so they're very very helpful in that regard, and they're very efficient. So we get stuff through them pretty quickly.
Yep. Everybody loves fact check.
No,
At least everybody I've
I
spoken to
seriously
loves
do.
fact check.
I cannot state enough how invaluable our fact checking team is and how much I appreciate their efforts and contribution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to another thing that Shrapnel has been doing to canonize certain mechs, actually. For example,
Mhm,
the Commando variants from Mech Warrior 2 and
mhm,
the I mean, was originally the Hellhound in Mech Warrior 4. It became the Hellcat because the Hellhound already exists.
mhm.
And I mean, that was really cool. I liked seeing that. So, when it comes to getting these new mechs, which is really canonizing these old mechs from all these old video games, um,
Mhm.
is there basically a plan to just go through every video game and canonize the every single mech, or can submit mechs for
I
canonization? How does that work?
mean, not really. Well, the way we choose mechs for shrapnel issues involves a very high degree of sorcery and ritual and no, I'm just kidding. Um, but no, it largely boils down to I usually have a regular chat with Johannes, the our uh, tech readout developer, and we usually talk about hey, what would be some good mechs for upcoming issues of Shrapnel. Um, Sometimes I'll have authors pitch me mechs that they want to write about, like they'll find usually the entries in Shrapnel are very like odd variants that most people might not have seen, or they might be like mentioned offhandedly in like one book, and there's just not much written about it. Like for example, one of the early ones was the 55-ton Centurion.
Hmm.
People were like, "What? Wait, what?"
From Mech Commander. Do you
Centurions
remember
are
that
supposed
guy?
Centurions are supposed to be 50 tons, And so we're basically finding like the weird, odd, like unique mechs. Maybe they might have had sort of like a troubled production history in terms of like um, real life production history, as opposed to like, you know, in universe. Sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and we just sort of kind of like try to like fill in those gaps while also introducing like some new stuff. So like we might take a one-off mention from some random source book or novel like back in the day, and then we'll stat that out. But then we'll also come up with like some more modern variants of that to give people who want to play in like different eras more stuff to more stuff to play with. Um, yeah, so by and large, the tech readout entries are we sort of kind of curate those for some specific reasons. Sometimes with synergy, sometimes we'll have one that kind of fits the theme of an issue for whatever reason. But every once in a while, I'll reach out to our author pool and be like, "Hey, is there a mech that you want to write a tech readout entry for Shrapnel?" And I'll get some pitches for that. And it really just depends. There's a lot of calculus that goes into it, a lot of brainstorming, behind the scenes chats and stuff that go into choosing the mechs. Sometimes it comes from the development side of things. Sometimes it comes from authors. It really just depends.
Fair. Um,
Mhm,
I guess I got sort of a similar answer then to be for Shrapnel's Planet Digest,
mhm.
which I think has mostly sidelined Touring the Stars because we get these.
I don't know if that was like intentional. I think I think the touring the stars is just it's just more of a production backlog, I think, more than anything. Excuse me. As far as I'm aware, I don't think the Touring the Stars series is canceled. I don't think Shrapnel has really killed it. Because they're kind of like completely different formats. Whereas
Hmm.
the Touring the Stars, it's like it's um, a very in-depth, like deep dive into it where you get all the stats and all the history and like, I think they have planetary maps in them too,
Hmm.
for doing like the planetary conquest type stuff. Like there's so much more that goes into it than just like a, 3 or 4 page shrapnel entry.
Right.
In fact, see, there was one planet, I'm trying to remember, can't remember offhand what planet it was, but the author who wrote that was actually also working on a Touring the Stars for that and actually used the shrapnel entry as basically like as like a baseline and then greatly expanded it from there. So so it's more like the shrapnel entry can get people interested, be like, oh, maybe I want to set a future campaign here, or whatever. And then the Touring the Stars is like, here's the full package if you want to dig even deeper. So they just kind of scratch completely two different itches.
All right. Cool. Now let's move on to Shrapnel's campaign scenarios, since you also
Mhm.
publish campaign scenarios there, and I've seen most of them come from Eric Salzman. He's really big on them.
Yeah, he sends me. Well, the thing about choosing, excuse me, choosing scenarios from Shrapnel is, I get a whole bunch of people pitch me things or whatever, and I basically go through and choose the one that I think either might fit the issue's theme a little more if it has a theme,
Hmm.
um, or a scenario that it's like, oh, okay, I really want to sit down and play this, or like I think this would be really fun. And it just so happens that like a lot of the scenarios that fit that bill were written by Eric. So I'm
But
not I'm not I'm not biased toward him or anything. He just comes up with when someone gives me a good piece of content, I'm all for it.
all right.
So
But so you
yeah.
will accept scenarios from other authors,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and like, would you accept it as a random submission, or like, is the process always to make sure you can write a short story first to get published in Shrapnel, and then you can get
I
access
mean
to these
that's
other avenues or other
that's
article series, I should say?
um I mean sometimes honestly like most of the people that are in my pool for writing game content stuff are ones that have either like show me that they have writing chops or they already work on BattleTech source books or with they're like like this happens a lot like members of the Callus demo team where they know BattleTech, they actually know the game because they run it in their local stores a lot, like so I know that they're very competent in game writing. Um, and so, like, I'll get a lot of pitches from them. Um, but by and large, the reason why the game content curation is a little separate from the short story submissions is that writing a short story and writing something for like game side material are very different skill sets. Sure, there's like some overlap or whatnot because writing is writing. But um, it, it's been my experience that a lot of times people need to sort of like be trained on how to write good game material. And not say that like a first timer couldn't write good game material, but there's usually a little bit of like nuance and finesse, I guess, that goes into writing game material. And so I've actually had some people send me game material through the short story submission form, and I've read the submissions and gone, yeah, this is kind of why I don't have this opened up to like brand new people. Um, but like, if someone really wants to write game content for Shrapnel, the best way to do that would be to, you know, like I've talked to people at conventions and they've expressed interest or um Like sometimes people have emailed me and said, it's like, hey, here's like a sample that I've written. What do you think of this or whatever? Um, there's a number of different avenues to get into the actual game writing side of things. But by and large, it's a very personal kind of connection basis rather than, here's something in a submission pile. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Okay. Um, Now, Shrapnel is the official BattleTech magazine, but there are some unofficial BattleTech magazines out there, such
Yeah.
as Pirate Point and Override, just to name two
Yeah.
off the top of my head. Have you read any of these publications?
I have not, and I don't know if I would be allowed to,
Oh, okay.
simply because uh, like when it comes to like unofficial things, that's always like a really weird gray area when it comes to people who work on properties in an official capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for example, I always think back to this lawsuit that a fan, uh, where a fan who submitted a story to a fanzine sued the author, claiming that the author had stolen this person's story idea from the fanzine
Mm-hmm.
and incorporated it into a future novel in her series. And this case got like dragged through the courts, and it um, it made the author's health suffer essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that sort of precedent of fans suing authors and so on and so forth, like it's like a legal matter that we try to like not get into. So if you're having something that's like unofficial stuff, uh I can't really read that because it can not to say that anyone would possibly want to sue, but it's just one of the things we have to sort of kind of cover our rear end on. So it's the same reason why why I can't really read BattleTech fan fiction for like the same sort of um, same sort of reason.
I mean, that's a fair point. I recall one story of one particular BattleTech person who somehow got their fan idea published in on the official BattleTech site at one point, and it did result in an actual lawsuit against. I forget if this was back during the FASA days or if it was the WizKids
Oh
days.
yeah,
So this is
I know
a thing that's
what
happened.
you're talking about. You don't have
Yeah.
to couch it
Oh, okay. Well, that's
in,
fine. I just don't
in
want to mention
vagary.
their name.
I mean, I'm not gonna name names either, but
It's on Sarna. You
um,
can find them if you crawl far enough.
oh yeah.
All right.
Um, yeah, so because of that reason, I have seen I think it was it Adepticon, I think earlier this year, someone sort of surreptitiously like put one of the fanzines in our fiction bookshelf, covering over one of the novels, and I was just like,
Oh, come
what?
on.
And I think I did sort of just like page through it just because I wanted to see, like, I didn't actually read anything or whatever, but I just was like, oh, okay. So I just wanted to see what they did with it because zines are interesting.
Mhm.
Um, but no, I didn't actually like read any of it. And I guess my advice to people who send stuff to those sorts of like fanzines and stuff, whatever, is if if you want to be officially published, let's send me an actual submission. I will read it. That's a far better way to get my attention than to put something in a fanzine.
Okay. So
And that,
appreciate the
not
fanzines.
disparaging fanzines at
Yeah.
all. I think they're great. I'm glad they exist. But if you want to go official, go down the official submissions portal.
All right. One of the key staples for the of any ongoing periodical, such as
Mhm.
Shrapnel, is the classic advice column. Now, why doesn't Shrapnel have a BattleTech advice columnist? And could I be that columnist? My rates are very reasonable.
What when you say advice columnist, are you talking about um like a uh, like an in-universe character writing an advice column, or like a real life, you know, where it's like you write it and be like,
I think both
oh,
would work.
every time I put down like I don't know, Mech X on the board, every person I play with immediately kills that because they hate it so much. How can I make people stop hating this mech, you
I
know?
think both would work really well, actually. So yeah.
Or yeah. I mean, honestly, the only reason why I haven't had that is because no one has pitched that idea
Huh.
before.
Okay.
I mean, and to be fair, like I've had a number of different, like uh, recurring article series that I've published, but it's simple matter of fact is, no one has pitched it, so it hasn't really.
Okay. Well, here I am pitching it.
Should I put you on my official pitch list?
Sure. I'm not sure I would necessarily always be able to actually answer. Like, if it's a rules related question, you should probably
Yeah.
get someone who's actually a rules expert to answer it. But I feel like that's a thing that could be cool. Just as an idea. Anyway, let's move on quickly to the next question. This one's more Sarna related. How has Sarna aided in ensuring that submissions are of a quality that you can tolerate? And what sorts of things could Sarna improve upon? Because we know Sarna isn't perfect, and maybe that has
Yeah.
contributed to a mix up here or there.
Um, okay, so the first half of that question, I'm not really quite sure how to answer, simply because I don't really have any easy way of gauging the metric of that. Like in terms of, I mean, I know um, pretty much our entire writing team uses Sarn on a regular basis. I always encourage people to check the citations, like check the actual sources,
Mm-hmm.
because Sarna is great for doing like for starting the research, where you can like read a thing, get like the nuggets of an idea or whatever. And then you go to the citation and then consult the actual source, and like you get even more information that's sometimes more detailed, um, and that sort of thing. So yeah, so we all use it in some capacity or another. So it is definitely invaluable to our process. Um, but as far as what like people who submit stories, I honestly don't really know. I would assume that they use it. In fact, actually kind of segueing into the second half of the question, I've seen little telltales that tell me that they've used Sarna in their research. So I know people definitely use it outside of just our core writing pool. Um, but in terms of things that Sarna could do better, first off, one of the telltales I started noticing, I want to say this was like maybe a year ago. I started noticing that a lot of submissions that I was getting, excuse me, were having the planet name in the epigraph, like the four-ish line thing that starts every single story in most scenes, is that the planet name would have a Roman numeral at the end of it. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Because and a lot of times, like I'm talking about planets where I know this planet, and I've literally never seen it with an actual Roman numeral next to it. Like I don't know, like what is it, Lucian 4?
Mm-hmm.
I think I can't remember what position it is, or whatever. But I
Yeah.
think I saw a story that was like instead of just saying, Lucian Draconis Combine, it just said like Lucian 4 or whatever it was, and I was just like, that's weird. Delete those two, their Roman numeral, whatever, and then like go to another story, and like that one's fine, and I'll go to another story and be like, huh, why does this have a Roman numeral at the end of this one too? And I'm like, that's kind of weird. And so I was noticing like this pattern where I was like, these shouldn't really have Roman numerals on them. Now, granted, there are some that very famously have Roman numerals, like for example, Solaris 7.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and But if you but usually if you look at the map, you'll see just Solaris is the actual name. But a lot of people reference Solaris 7 because there's multiple inhabited planets in the Solaris system. And so people use the 7 to say, hey, I'm talking about the one where they have all the arena fights.
Hmm.
And not just what is it, Solaris 4 or Solaris 2, I think it's like a mining planet or something. I can't
Accurate.
remember off the
Yeah.
top of my head. Yeah.
There's a
And
few.
so in that case, when the actual planet name or like specific planet designation is important, then that's when you see like the Roman numerals. But I was getting like these weird planets that I've literally never seen Roman numerals for, and it's not a system that's was canonized as having multiple inhabited planets in the system. And I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. And so then I went to Sarna and I went to like, okay, huh, so this page has a Roman numeral on it. Okay, interesting. And then I went to like another one and was like, huh, okay, this page has a Roman numeral on it too. That's interesting. And so I was noticing like this pattern. I was like, this has got to be from, because I know Sarna in the last number of years had
Hmm.
sort of done like a revamp of all the planet pages, like added so much more detail to it and everything, which is great. But then I was like, that there's got to be this pattern of people looking at like they'll look at the map, they'll find it on they'll look it up on Sarna and then say, oh, okay, this Sarna page says that it's this planet name with the Roman numeral, even though it's the only inhabited planet in the system. And so I was like, okay, so I guess that's just a case of what they call cytosis,
Hmm.
like citation, but cytosis, um, which is sort of like a phenomenon it's happened a couple times. But to give you an idea of like what cytosis is I try to remember the exact like the most prominent example of it was I think it was like a was it the first chancellor of the Capellan Confederation? I think it was him, where uh his wife's name was never actually mentioned in any of the source books. And then at one point there was a source book, or I think we figured out that um that the wife was named in a source book because the author of that particular piece had gone to the Sarna article about this individual and saw, oh, okay, it says his wife's name is this, but there wasn't any like citation for that. And so it sort of kind of like became like this like
Hmm.
internal feedback loop of someone at some point had written in an article something that didn't have a citation and that was not necessarily accurate, but it ended up becoming accurate because someone referenced that and was like, oh, okay, so this has to be true. And instead of verifying it against actual material, published material, they went ahead and canonized that without realizing that it was not accurate.
Hmm.
And so that's basically what cytosis is, where something that's was not canon becomes canon because of like an inaccuracy in an article. And so every single time I've come across like incorrect things in articles before, and I usually try to correct them there when I can, or I'll ping someone and be like, "Hey, this can someone take care of this or whatever." If it's something like a little more in depth or whatnot. But yeah, so I try to limit that as much as I can whenever I see it. But examples like that big are kind of not really very common.
Okay, well
But
that's good.
it is like one of the potential dangers um, of working with a wiki. But again, it's kind of minimal. It's just one of those weird little factoids. It's like, huh, this person is named because of something on the wiki. Hmm.
Yeah, and that seems like a relatively small thing. Although we're sorry about the planet thing. I think that was just
Oh yeah,
standardization that went amok.
no, that was one of those kind of things like where it's like I understand the rationale for it, and I applaud the initiative, but it was just one of those sort of things that like from like a development editorial standpoint, it kind of made us like stop and go, well, now we're not sure if a planet needs to have Roman numerals or not, because we can't always be like, check every single planet on every single map,
Mhm.
uh, and that sort of thing. So yeah, so I applaud the initiative. I understand why it was done, um, but things happen.
Fair.
I'm not mad about it. I was just sort of like, oh, that's interesting, and it was just funny that I could sort of kind of put the puzzle pieces together and figure. I was like, oh, that's what's probably going on. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, well, if that comes up again, let me know and we'll look into it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get to an important question because Shrapnel accepts stories. So
Mhm.
far, it doesn't accept art. Will Shrapnel ever
Yeah.
get into the business of publishing art?
Well, we did an experiment with fan art in issue 3, and you know, I won't really bore you with the details of that, but kind of like ran into some hurdles with that on the behind the scenes side of things, where the idea is like essentially if we publish anything we publish in Shrapnel has to be completely owned. So we have to like basically buy art from people,
Mm-hmm.
and and some people were like, well, I don't want to sell this. Like I want to give it to you. And we're like, that's not how legality works. It's like we literally we have to send you a contract, you have to sign it, we have to pay you for it, and it becomes like the property of Topps, who owns the BattleTech IP. And that was just it was far too many hoops to jump through to actually make that work. Um, and yeah, it's just we like the idea of doing it. It's just the hurdles of actually making that work are just kind of infeasible. If that makes any sense. But like all the art that we feature in Shrapnel, it goes through a lengthy process where we write art notes for the pieces. We get sketches, we get finishes, we get pre-finals, we get the art direction. Like it's just a whole like professional full production process. And with like submitted art, we can't really like have any control over that sort of thing. And so it's just a matter of legal rights and production logistics, essentially. So
Fair enough.
that's
Okay.
that's the boring answer.
Well, that's fine, but sometimes boring is important to know.
Yeah.
And we'll get to the final question, the most important question for you today.
Mhm.
What does the future of Shrapnel hold?
Oh, well, let's see. 23 is coming out in December. That's got a lot of fun stuff in it. Um, I try to with every issue that comes out in December, try to put a little bit of like holiday content in it,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's like real world holiday stuff or fake BattleTech holiday stuff. Um, like let's see, issue 3 was all about Founding Day, which was it's a very uh, um, important holiday for the clans, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that also happens to fall in December, so that kind of worked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I got some fun holiday related stuff in that issue. Um, and then on the horizon, there's the big number 25 milestone, which 25 is a really good milestone to celebrate. So we're making that a double size issue.
Ooh.
We got some of our veteran big gun heavy hitters coming out swinging for that one. And then from there we'll keep making shrapnel for as long as you guys want it.
All right. Well, we'll
So
probably want it forever, so it's going to be a long time.
it's like every single convention I go to, I've been to, let's see, I went to what, 3 conventions this year? At least 3. And almost every single convention, I have multiple people, we're just chatting with them around our fiction shelves, talking about Shrapnel, and they're just like, shaking my hand and saying, "I love Shrapnel. It's like, one of my favorite things. Like, I'm always happy to crack it open every 3 months and so on and so forth." And they're just like, "Keep doing what you're doing." And I'm like, "I plan on
Excellent.
it."
All right,
Yeah.
now nobody gets out of these interviews without doing a couple of fun questions. Although we went a little bit over time, so I'm gonna try and make these really quick.
Yeah, yeah.
So the first one from the Sarna Discord, and this is a very short question. More Ludwig when, Phil?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure how to answer that.
Okay, fair enough. Next question, from also from the Sarna Discord. What sci-fi universe do you think would be the best matchup for BattleTech in a versus battle?
In a versus battle. Oh goodness, you're just trying to make me think really hard now. Um, I probably have to say Starship Troopers maybe.
Okay.
Like in terms of like military technology and just general aesthetics. Um, Probably leaning more toward like um the the Starship Troopers, like the movie, and then also like the animated series that they did,
Mm-hmm.
where they have more of like the battle armor and stuff.
And the dropships
Um,
and yeah, the
but
cool stuff.
yeah, I think that would be a really cool mashup because
All right.
then we could have battle mechs and elementals and mobile infantry, both infantry and uh, dropships and their battle armor versus bugs. That'll be cool.
All right. And this last question here. What was the most unintentionally hilarious error that you had to correct while editing a story?
Um, let's see. I feel like there's been a couple of typos that were like accidental swear words. Yeah, I'm obviously not going to say what they were, but yeah, I think there was. Okay, actually, I think one of the most. I don't think this was in Shrapnel per se, but it was definitely in like a something BattleTech related, where the typo was it said sex fox instead of sea fox. I was just like, okay, I can see how that happened because the X is very close to the A
Yeah,
on
it's
the
right there.
keyboard. And I literally screenshotted that and sent that to the group chat that I have with John and Craig Reed and Jason Hansa, and was like, okay, this is probably one of the best typos I've ever seen. Yeah.
Right on. Okay, well, that's everything I have for you. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
answering questions about Shrapnel, about
Mhm.
your upcoming works, and I'm looking forward to seeing that December issue of Shrapnel.
Yep. It, it's coming along. It should be done here in a few days. So
All right, excellent. Okay, well, thanks so much. Take
yeah,
care.
thanks.